Thank you for showing up after such a lovely lunch. We had such a beautiful lunch that I think anyone that's here may need to get up and stretch a couple times and do some deep knee bends. It was a lovely lunch, and I think we're ready to roll. So I'm Tim Lynch. I think I know everyone in the room except these two lovely ladies. And may I ask you to share your names with us?
Me?
Yes.
Charlie Estes.
Charlie?
I'm Bia.
Bia, are you a student?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Welcome. And many of you have seen different things that I've done. This is going to be a little different, but those of you that know me know that I was the state's healthcare economist, chief healthcare economist, and the state's chief environmental economist at different times. And so I became very passionate about studying healthcare issues and studying pollution in the environment and what goes on in the environment and how it affects our health. And so I started looking at, as one gets older, you know, Hank Williams said that you can tell a person's old because they stop lying about their age and start bragging about it. And in this case, I'm going to give you a little background on me in a minute. And he also said, you know, as you get older, things either dry up or they start leaking. So those are all true things. So we're going to talk about how our taste buds have been hijacked by the industry, and what's the moral and the equitable way to look at these things, and what we can do about how we've been hijacked. First thing is, I'd like you to understand big ag and fast food producers. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell it to you, then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So big ag has hijacked our taste buds, and it's important to realize that it's not just big ag, but it's tobacco, and it's alcohol, and it's even pharmaceuticals. And they are not interested in our well-being, they're interested in their own profits. Also, the new ethic that they've created in this country is creating, yet again, more of a negative effect than positive. They're feeding more people, but we have obese, malnourished individuals across our country, now increasingly across the world. And finally, we can make conscious choices to do things about that. And that's part of what my education and background is going to show. What are the ethics and the morals of these things? Ethics refers to rules and provided by an external source, codes of conduct, society, principles of religion, how we behave according to some written and some unwritten rules. Those are the ethics of our culture. There could be bad ethics as well as good ethics. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're good. Morals, on the other hand, refer to your own individual principles regarding right and wrong. How do you choose from among the things that are offered you? And so we're going to talk about that. My personal journey, back when I was 59 in 2006, I was quite strong, but I was also way out of control. I weighed 210 pounds and kind of was doing pretty well, but still not really well. Then, just over the last few years, Regina and I went on a 7-day Caribbean cruise, and it included all of the most amazing doctors giving presentations on wellness and things that we could do for ourselves. I've always been an athlete, a runner, and I started running to stop smoking, but on the other hand, I hadn't always eaten well. Like many Americans, I had brought my children, used to bring them to McDonald's for Happy Meals. Come to find out they're not very happy. That is to say, the children were, but the meals weren't. And so here we can fast forward another 12 years later, that was this year, and I am 12 years older and about 10 years younger. I've dropped 30 pounds, and I've added life to my years and years to my life. And we all can, and we'll do this in our world if we choose to, or not. But this is part of my journey and my education. Why am I doing this? Well, I'm doing this because this little sweetie on the right side was just born to my daughter 3 days ago. And this little guy on my left is 2 years old, and these are my grandchildren and Regine's grandchildren that we look forward to seeing in the very near term. But I want to see them grow. I don't want to die of something that's preventable. If I get hit by a bus, fair enough. But I don't want to die of something that's curable and something I can do something about. This is the guy that started the whole thing. he is the nephew of Sigmund Freud and Edward Bernays. And he came to this country and started using the methods of manipulation of the public and started creating for profit the use of crowd psychology and for corporations to build, to create new ethic, which are only of morals, to only have the value of helping the corporations make a profit, and they don't care a lick about you and I. But in the early 1900s, he was using their subconscious. He combined ideas of crowd psychology with psychoanalytic ideas from his uncle, and he thought that the herding instinct in human society, if it wasn't guided by someone like him, was dangerous, and that they should be avoided at all costs, and we needed to guide people's opinions by creating demand for things that were not necessary. So the first thing he did, the typical breakfast in the 1920s was oatmeal, orange juice, and roll and cup of coffee. Often I've heard my mother speak of, she just passed away, she was 98 just a couple of years ago, and they grew up with grain as part of their principal source of food. You even hear it when we go to Europe, of course, the continental breakfast. And it's fruit, and it's maybe some bread, coffee, juice, and that's it. It's not bacon and eggs. But he was approached in the 1920s by the head of the Beech Nut Corporation to increase bacon sales, and he did a survey of a few doctors, and they suggested that, in fact, Americans lose energy when they sleep at night and needed to have a heavier breakfast so that they could have better energy during the day and carry their bodies more forcefully. And so he got these doctors to all sign a testament to this fact, and he published it in the newspaper nationwide, and it went, we would say now, this is him saying it, I'm going to skip through this, but he got people to change their diets almost overnight, and the Beech Nut corporation that sold this bacon doubled their sales and tripled their sales, and he was a very rich man after this. And this is creating a new ethic, We all grew up thinking bacon and eggs was a normal American thing and very good for us. When you get older, you start realizing the effects it has on your body, and you start either making adjustments to those things, and those are the moral values creating a reaction to the ethic that was created falsely by someone trying to manipulate us. He later got approached by the tobacco companies in the 1920s and asked if they could help him expand their market. At that point in time, only men could smoke, and it was against the law for women to smoke. In fact, women could go to jail. And it was also a time of tremendous conflict and intense energy among women to try to get the right to vote and have equality as their due right. And so as a result, women didn't want to go to prison, but they also wanted to establish themselves. So this character, Bernays, asked his beautiful secretary, who's pictured here, Bertha Hunt, to step out of a crowd at an Easter parade. And several of the other women that were in the parade were hired models. And not only did they take a cigarette from their purse, but they took a match from their stockings, very provocative. And they lit the match and smoked the cigarette, and they struck a lucky strike. And as it happens, not by chance, the New York Times was there, and they ran a title, "Group of Girls Puff Cigarettes as a Gesture of Freedom." So here it was, the first manipulation of women now to light the, quote, freedom torch. And women picked this up. It was a new ethical value established. And women couldn't resist because it was establishing their independence and their emancipation. And they aggressively started smoking as a show of independence. We all understand and remember it was when we were teenagers and what we did as rebellion. Well, this was the rebellion. So this is the kind of character this guy was. And since that time, the same momentum has been picked up by big ag, fast food companies, and their next target was the bliss point. This article, this book, Salt, Sugar, and Fat, was a winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Michael Moss, documents how salt, sugar, and fat have been introduced into our food lexicon so that you increase the salt, sugar, and fat content up to this bliss point, this highest point. Thereafter it becomes bitter or astringent, and that's not going to make sales. But you want to change the dietary habits of Americans to the point that it gets the most sales. You don't care about the health consequences. And as a result, the companies all in this, the bliss point, the breaking point, America's war on extraordinary science of addiction of junk food. This is all part of an ongoing battle that has been waged since the end of World War II. Before that, real food was the main substance of what we ate in this country. And very much like Bernays from the 1920s or now in the 1940s, fast through to the 2000s and 2018s. And the growth of the use of sugar as a substitute, as an additive to food, has been nothing short of criminal. Nothing short of criminal. Some of these companies, I guess I can't do much about the graphic is not, but some of the companies have actually about boosted the power and structure of sugar, and they up to 200 times its natural strength, which is what this says, amplifying the sugar up to 200 times. And the issue becomes a hedonic value food chain where the addiction becomes so powerful that you can't get enough of it. And you eat it, and it doesn't stay with you, and the food just goes instantly into fat. There's a product called fructose, high fructose corn syrup, that has been so widely distributed in all the foods we eat, and it bypasses your liver. Your liver, it's a chemically created substance that was created in the 1950s and 60s in Japan. It's cheaper than regular sugar, and it's used and it's much more intense in terms of its sweetness, and your liver can't do anything with it in your bloodstream. In fact, what happens is the liver itself sends out glucose to sends out insulin to reduce the sugar level in your blood, and the sugar level isn't influenced by the insulin, this glucose. So as a result, it goes bypass your liver and goes right into fat, bypassing, and this is all the foods that we eat every day, and it is, again, known to be addictive. And how can we win when the industry is spending $4.6 billion on advertising fast food? Fruits and vegetables are only spending $116 million. There are very few powerful interests in the fruit and vegetable industry, and so as a result, what you find for snacks and things are things that are prepackaged, and it's also the things that are cheapest because it's subsidized by the federal government. Meanwhile, less than 1% of kids' meals in restaurants meet nutritional standards. Just 3% are even healthy, let alone meeting nutritional standards. And look what we've done to our soda. Soda has become, when I was a kid, we would have a 6, 7-ounce soda, and now you can go into any fast food 7-Eleven and fill for $1 the 128 ounces. It's reached the proportion where the results are that children think it's a normal thing to drink as much soda as possible and get free refills and not know any of the consequences. Well, this is the consequence, empty nutrition. If you're eating empty nutrition, you're not getting good nutrition because your belly is full with stuff that can't be processed and effectively, and as a result, you're not getting what you really need. So we get, again, malnourished obesity. This is more what's going on. Even McDonald's workers are told that it's their website that it's a danger to eat fast food. Don't eat too much. So we're left with this kind of a conundrum. What do we eat? Is it fast? Is it low sugar? Is it low fat? Is it fat-free? Is it... we're caught with this conundrum of not knowing how to deal with these constraints. What about the environmental effects and the health effects? Well, a simple preventable problem is the fat disease advance of modern man. We can see that we're doing pretty well up until about 100 years ago, and then we're thrown back. In fact, this is one of the most scary parts of my presentation is the growth of obesity, growth of overweight people in the U.S., and this is up to 70%, and the obesity level is skyrocketing. This is not news to any of us, but it's again preventable, but it's also resulting in some pretty serious side effects. The soda per capita and the adult disease rate per capita, diabetes rate per capita, you see how they overlap? And it's not coincidence. It's all about what we put in our mouth. We are not only what we eat, but we are what our parents ate. And excess consumption, this is the epigenetic reality that we are now understanding, that what we eat is going to influence not only our children, but our grandchildren and our grandchildren's children. And this is the story of glucose. Notice the difference between after a shot of glucose, your sugar level goes up this much. After a shot of fructose, your sugar levels go up twice as high. And there's no regulation of the fructose, and as a result, it's passed through. This is a genetic predisposition that is being passed through to our children's children. And it's a condition that I can't even begin to imagine what the costs are and the consequences for the future. And of course, we have the forecast in the growth of diabetes and the growth of cardiovascular disease. And on the way in, we were talking about one of our friends, and he actually met me at the gym at Premier, and he said, "I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you shared with me." And Myra was telling me about her son, who's had the same exact experience. He's been told he's had a heart attack and bypass surgery, and he's been told he needs to go on a vegan diet. And it's a shock to you to hear that, but that's the only known cure for coming back from heart disease. And that's what my very good friend who lost 45 pounds, Bill Williford, who I met just down the street from here at the Student Union back in 1970, lost 45 pounds and is off his high blood pressure medicine, off his cholesterol medication, and off his sugar diabetes. So we know all of this, but what can we do about it? I'm learning that this is almost as touchy as talking about Republicans to Democrats and Democrats to Republicans, or it's a subject of religion. This is what we can do about it. Learn from the blue zones. The blue zones were this amazing collection of places all over the world where people lived regularly to well over 100. They were in Loma Linda, California, Costa Rica, Italy, Gretchenland, wherever that is, and Japan. And these populations were studied to see what is it that allows these people on a large number of them live well and live well over 100, adding life to their years and years to their life. These are the things that they had in common, overlapping. Notice one of them is gardening. If you all have heard my wife Regine talk, and you heard some of the earlier presenters talk, you learned about why they love gardening. And it's because of all these reasons of touching the soil, seeing things grow, building community, building your own health, being out in the sunshine, touching the soil. And this is exactly the message that comes from these gardeners. They get vitamin D from the sun, they play in the dirt, they're getting grounded, they get stress release, known solution for depression, they eat vegetables, and they get exercise. That's the solution to these conditions we face in this country and across the world. The lesson from the Blue Zone is get out and grow a garden and you'll heal your body. And they eat wisely, they belong to family groups. Again, the connections that we're making here in this community of gardeners. We were just talking earlier about Reverend Ivy. She's come to our house and we've helped her with her presentations, and Regine has offered much of the greens from our garden to her to bring to the people that are malnourished in Tallahassee who don't have much money. And it's a connection that wouldn't have happened otherwise if this gathering hadn't happened. And we're having these connections across the community now, and across our people, friends we haven't yet met. And so that's what this is about. If we want to live well and live, some of the people drink wine, some don't. Some of these ancient mariners, but they embrace purpose, rely on a plant-based diet, they get gardening, and they also eat more soy, stay active, and plant a medicinal garden. These are people that are all over 100 years old. What can we do about this? Lessons from the Blue Zone. This is what's happening in America today. Everyone knows that what I've already said pretty much in one form or another, but what we're starting to see is action in the growth and consumption of organic foods. Organic food has doubled over the last 8 years, and it's topping $47 billion in 2016, 5.1% of the total. Regular food is only growing, the consumption of regular food, non-organic, is only increasing by 0.6%, but organic food is growing at a rate of 5.1%. How about the number of gardeners in the U.S.? They've gone up by 17% since the year 2012. I think that means that our population is getting the message. We want to eat better, we want to grow more, we want to have better things that are stimulating our bodies in the ways that our bodies are accustomed and expecting. Would you believe that more than $3.6 billion I've spent on growing vegetables, fruits, berries, and herbs? And 75% of all households have some gardening activity. 1 in 3 are gardening for growing plants, edibles. 1 in 3. What about Alzheimer's? As we get older, some of us are, we're looking for not only a cure for cardiovascular disease, but to arrest the slippage in our memories. Same answer. The rare success against Alzheimer's, a gold standard clinical trial, provides evidence that diet, exercise, and active social life can help prevent cognitive decline. Imagine, in the U.S., 32% of people older than 85 have received an Alzheimer's diagnosis, 1 in 3. In spite of that, there have been no fewer than 200 experimental drugs, and not one of them is proven to be useful for anything associated with decline. But there's a Finnish study that had over 1,200 people, and a recommended diet of fruits, vegetables, whole grain, rapeseed oil, along with a fish meal, at least twice a week. This is essentially the Mediterranean diet. And engaged in physical exercise. Does this sound like a garden? Sounds like the Blue Zone, doesn't it? Using the computer program to work on cognitive tasks. And what were the results? The intervention group logged 83% improvement over the control group in executive function. Not only did they not decline, they increased their abilities. Not only, and 150% better score in speed of processing, and 40% better in complex memory tasks, like remembering a long list. I guess I'm not included in that group because I forget things quickly, but my wife is my memory bank. But these are the findings again. How shocking to realize we already knew this, didn't we? And yet we need, this is the best study on prevention or slowing of Alzheimer's on the planet Earth. 200 pills don't get it, but this does. Yet another study. Daily consumption of leafy greens may be a simple and effective way to protect against loss in memory and other cognitive declines. And as well as a cure for depression and anything that ails you. It's the elixir of life. Well, what can we do about this? Health and economic effects of eating more plant-based foods. The cost of health care, again, I know you don't need to be a healthcare economist to realize that America leads the world, almost double what the rest of the world is spending, almost double what the rest of the world is spending as a percentage of gross national product on healthcare. And our results are among the worst among the developed countries. And health per capita, we're up here around 9,000. I'm sure you can't make that out. $9,000 per capita for spending on these things. The CDC, this is the thing that Mario and I were talking about earlier. This is a study from Dr. Esselin. Biometrics, there were 198 people with documented cardiovascular disease. Almost 200 people. The disease, there were, let's see, I think 21 people left the study. Of the 177, they were able to stick with the diet. for 4 years, they found there were only one person had a recurring stroke, only one of 177, versus of the 21 people who didn't stick with the experience, 13 had recurrence. It speaks volumes of what we can do out of choice. And this is my own study from the Plant Pure Nation analysis. There were 5 groups of people that ate a whole plant-based food diet for just 10 days. And the results in just 10 days, suggested a drop. You can't see the percentages, I'll read them to you. I'm sorry about the formatting. Almost 40% drop in triglycerides. LLD dropped by 25%. Total cholesterol dropped by 22%. No cholesterol medicine on the planet can do that. 10 days. And high triglyceride ratio dropped, body weight dropped by 4%. That's just from 10 days. Imagine what, so when I got off the boat with this vegan cruise, my weight dropped, as you can see, 30 pounds, I mentioned. And my cholesterol went to 187. And then we went to France. And my sweet mother-in-law and I ate many bits of cheese and had rich desserts, and my cholesterol went back up. So, you know, it's one of those things where you find out your own, just like Regina was talking about, experimenting in your garden, see what grows and what doesn't. See what your own predispositions are. But those are the results that stick in my mind when I see documented studies that nothing else can touch for Alzheimer's, for cardiovascular disease, for stroke, for... and so what I concluded in my analysis is that the potential savings, if we were to put everybody in the country that had this condition on a diet, as Myra's son has been put on, we would save up to almost $73 billion in direct medical costs and 37 in indirect productivity losses. Almost 150 billion by the year 2030 and 50 billion by indirect productivity losses. This would make America tumble in terms of spending per capita, or spending total for healthcare. Make it affordable. So, what else? The environmental effects. If you look at the carbon dioxide production associated with any of the foods that we are now find common on our plate, an example would be a pound of lamb generates per pound about 20 pounds of carbon dioxide. And it would take, you'd have to drive a car over 50 miles, 42 miles to have an equivalent loss of a generation of carbon dioxide. So that's the most expensive part of our culture in terms of generating carbon dioxide emissions that in turn, of course, are global warming related. And as you go down the chain, you'll see that 1/1000th of that among the vegetables, fruits, and nuts are generated per pound of equivalent. So 1 pound of each one of these products that we produce on farms generates different levels of carbon dioxide because of the amount of water they use, transportation, and so forth and so on. So as a result, if we were to shift our eating patterns, and I'm going to ask Sally to comment on this later, to a vegan diet, we would dramatically, we'd achieve the Kyoto Protocol without even breathing hard. This is an example of the number of tons per person generated if you're a meat lover, average, no beef, vegetarian or vegan, and you can see that the vegan diet and the vegetarian diet are half of what the meat lover produces in terms of just from what's on their plate. It's shattering to think that this is one of the primary causes of our planet heating up. And then how much water do we consume with each of these products? Chocolate, highly refined product. Beef is almost 14,000 quarts of water for every pound grown. Sheep meat, pork, butter, dairy, chicken, cheese, olives. As you get down towards fruit and vegetables, it drops off to almost immeasurable because it's obviously a consumptive product that is growing naturally in the soil. It doesn't require all the substitutes and the the edible organic foods that we would otherwise eat, grain and so forth, that the animals require to be sustained. So we're destroying our atmosphere, we're destroying our water quality, we're destroying our land, and all because we're prioritizing making a profit for these big ag and big food. What can we as a community do? We can grow a garden. We've certainly seen the evidence that it'll help us and our bodies as well as the environment. We don't waste but share food, which is what we're about here at this conference. Eat less meat, eat lower on the food chain, eat protein from a variety of sources, legumes, nuts and seeds, and proteins and vegetables. So, again, we can make conscious choices across all of our lives. It's not just for young people. It's not, we saw the rates of obesity and cancer among older people, middle-aged people, but throughout our entire life, and how we educated our children and our grandchildren is going to have an important effect. So one of the things that we can share, I want to share, is how, what Regine and I have done with our solar panels. You heard in an earlier session, perhaps, when Regine was sharing. This is what my energy profile looked like before I met Regine. I had kids in college, and then I met Regine at about this point. Kids went off to college. Instead of burning 2,000, this is up close to 3,000 up here, 3,000 kilowatt hours per month of energy. The kids went off to school and it dropped, and then we installed a programmable thermostat. Regine came into my life. We lost shade from that 100-year-old water oak that Regine talked about. And you can see even when we had solar panels installed, it even dropped further. We're consuming the next, so you can see this is an average family's profile of energy use at our home. But even when we were down below this 500, 300, 200 kilowatt hours, we can still do better, which we've done by installing solar panels. And this is the difference between them over the last 1 year. With 1 year of solar panels installed, our profile has been cut by more than half, maybe 60%. The blue line is what the 2016, 2017 months of April through March consumed per month, and the yellow line is with the solar panels. So we're reducing our footprint, and this is the drop we've had between each of those months in terms of numbers of kilowatt hours not consumed. So we can reduce our footprint by eating more vegetables, fewer meat, as well as doing things to conserve energy in your life. And so, what else can we do? We can make ethical choices. Come join us in our garden. Add healthier years to your life, and lives. Add healthier life to your years and years to our lives. So I'm going to ask you to join me now in singing a song about the gardens. And those are the words. Speaking of gardens, there you go. Lost it, right?
We haven't memorized them yet.
Inch by inch. Now, when we got married, we took that song and we changed some of the words, and we sang it, and we got people to sing at our wedding. And we're gonna make this. What was it? Was it a garden?
We're gonna make this marriage grow.
Oh yes, that's right. Inch by inch, row by row.
This is our song when we got married. So here's the chorus. Inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. All it takes is a rake and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground. Sing with me. Inch by inch, row by row, please bless these seeds I sow. Please keep them warm below till the rain comes tumbling down. these seeds I sow, please keep them from the road to plant your rows straight and long, temper them with prayer and song. Mother Earth will make you strong if you give her love and care. Old drove crooks watching hungrily from his perch in yonder tree. In my garden I'm as free as that feathered thief up there. If find all it takes is a rake and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground. These vines grow I know, someone bless these seeds I sow. Please keep them from the road till the rain comes tumbling down. Till the rain comes tumbling down. Now let's start a discussion. Let's have some questions. And Myra, why don't you tell us about your son? Would you mind sharing his experience with us?
No, I don't, I hate to say this, but I don't know my son. He lives in Orlando, and I had made arrangements for us to go to, he comes at Thanksgiving time, so I made arrangements for us to go to Thanksgiving. When I got home, because I couldn't reach him on the phone, I had a phone call saying, from his father, saying he was in the hospital, he had a heart attack and